I generally try not to dip into YouTube drama, but sometimes the irony is too perfect. Hello, folks. For those of you who are expecting the finale of Doctor Who Flux as a Take-Two Doctor Who review today, that's gonna go to next week. I didn't want to risk bumping the planned Saturday video, partly because that is a Pride-themed video, and that's the last Saturday of Pride Month, so I didn't want to bounce that. Not to mention, while this is a story with way longer legs than I thought it was going to have, which is why I haven't talked about it, well, part of why I haven't talked about it prior to this, I didn't want to risk waiting that much longer. So, things moved around a little, but don't worry, it's all still coming. Anyways, so I actually legitimately don't talk about YouTube drama very much. As a rule of thumb, when I talk about YouTube, I'm complaining about the site itself, the algorithm ignoring me, some nonsense that they're pulling with stuff like the mid-roll credits, changes in policy, and just general idiocy by the company itself. I try very hard not to indulge in YouTube drama between creators because, well, as lucrative as it is, and it is lucrative, one of my 5 most viewed videos is of YouTube drama, specifically in regards to Channel Awesome, there is a reason that other than the 2 Channel Awesome videos I did, I really don't touch this topic, which is it very easily becomes a feedback loop of you do a video dissecting some drama. It's very easy for you then to get sucked into it and then discuss around it or to be attacked by the people who are supporting the person that the drama is surrounding, even if you're only trying to summarize it. Like, it gets very messy very quickly. And it's just one of the uglier sides of this platform. So even in cases where, like, I've had other creators specifically try and come at me, I've only ever done a response to that once. And so I don't even really do that. But this one, initially I thought I didn't have a lot to say. But then somebody asked me about it on Twitch. Follow me on Twitch if you aren't already. And I realized starting to talk about it, I've actually got more to say than I thought. Now, I am going to be going over some of the basic bullet points of what actually happened that kicked off all the drama to contextualize and give you some background. But if you are looking for a comprehensive analysis or timeline of what has gone on around the YouTube channel Illuminati, you are not going to find it here. I am not interested in cataloging every single offense or detailing every single aspect of this. What I am interested in is, after going over the fundamentals, putting it in the context of YouTube scandals in general to look at how this one's different from others. Because based off some of the stuff that has happened, it's playing out in an interesting way. And I think I know why, but I still find it interesting to talk about. So let's cover the basics. As I said, this is not going to be comprehensive. There are some great channels out there that have been doing videos ongoing as things have been unraveling. I found this video by Savvy Writes Books to be a very good overview video, generally speaking, if you want something like that. But there's plenty of stuff out there. People have been talking about this for a while, which, as I said, was part of the reason why I thought I might not talk about it, because this has been an ongoing thing for about 2 months now. These kinds of things don't last that long, as a rule, especially if the person that they're about isn't continually feeding into the whole drama situation, which arguably Blair Zahn, aka Illuminati, is not doing, but we'll get to all that. Also, it's kind of fun to go over how this all happened, because this started for the stupidest possible reason. This is really dumb how all this started. So, what are we talking about? As I said, the YouTube channel Illuminaughtii, which, if you are not familiar, is known for doing breakdowns of the falling apart of companies, of doing anti-MLM, multi-level marketing videos, talking about the hazards of those business models, often focusing on specific figures at the center of business-related controversies, people who ran their companies into the ground, tanked their own public image, etc., etc. I actually had watched some of her stuff before. The main reason I kind of fell off it was not because it wasn't good, but she cranks stuff out at she basically puts out content faster than I particularly want to take in that kind of content. And that's not to make it sound like she was doing shoddy or slapdash or hastily put together work. She has a team of people. She has researchers. She has an editing team. She had a crew of people, which was why she was able to produce stuff as rapidly as she did. But I watched some of her stuff for a little bit, but then kind of felt like, you talk about stuff more often than I want to hear this kind of stuff talked about. And I kind of bounced off after that. But since Illuminaughtii was a name that I recognized when this whole mess blew up, it did ping my radar. And it's been really interesting. As I said, it started for a very stupid reason, which means, fittingly, this all started on Twitter. So on April 20th of this year, Illuminaughtii put out a tweet accusing another YouTube channel, Legal Eagle, of stealing a particular editing technique from her videos, particularly having to do with the way in which text was highlighted in a document on screen during the video. Now, this is weird for a number of reasons. The first one being that you can't really steal a visual signifier like that. Like, unless it's a specific thing that you've trademarked. Like, for instance, lots of movies or TV shows for like their titles or whatnot will have a custom-made font just for that thing, just for them. And those are often trademarked as part of a brand. So like something like that, if somebody was using, you could argue that they are stealing it if it's not somehow being tied back to you in its use. But something just like an editing technique to highlight text, that's just an editing technique. The basis by which Illuminaughtii was making this claim of theft, in very large sarcasm quotes, was because apparently one of Legal Eagle's editors had reached out to one of her editors going, hey, how is it that you do that in your videos? What plugins do you use? Which should be your first thing, that this wasn't stolen. It's just asking what plugins to the editing software are used. Unless Illuminaughtii and her team personally programmed those plugins and never made them available to the public, they're just asking what tool you're using. That's not theft anyways. On that basis, Illuminaughtii said that she had then looked at some of Legal Eagle's videos, saw what she considered to be the same highlighting technique, just in a different color, and accused the channel of stealing her approach to things, which again, it's not really a thing, because even if they were using the exact same plugin, which you can't really prove, like, it doesn't matter. Like, seriously, if you know anything about video editing, ask 10 different editors to accomplish a certain style of thing for you. They will probably do it in 10 at least slightly different ways. There are a million ways to accomplish the exact same thing. So the whole thing was very strange. And she really ended up with egg on her face when two things were pointed out. The first was that the editor who was inquiring, and like that actually happened, they weren't asking on behalf of Legal Eagle. Because even though this editor did do work for Legal Eagle, they also did their own stuff. And they were asking for a video that they were making for themselves. And as the Legal Eagle YouTube channel pointed out, they'd actually been doing that kind of text highlighting for quite some time, well predating when this editor asked about it. So Illuminaughtii kind of had egg on her face immediately. Now, in kind of what should be considered, this should have been the end of it, she apparently got in touch with Legal Eagle. There was a bit of a back and forth. There came to be an understanding. She put out something of an apology, and in which she said, like, look, I went off the handle. I went off what my editors were telling me that they thought they saw. I acted rashly. I didn't look into it enough, which, if you're going to accuse somebody of effectively plagiarism, maybe you should check and make sure you know what you're talking about. But okay, she acted rashly, leapt to a conclusion, said something stupid. Well, that's it, right? No, no, it is not. Because around the same time, in kind of pointing out the irony, Bomber Guy, another quite large YouTube channel, he pointed out some potential plagiarism on the part of Illuminati. Because you see, Bomber Guy a little while back did a video on sort of the start of the modern anti-vax movement. And in association with that, he did an awful lot of research into the journalism and research and reporting of one Brian Deer. And so Bomber Guy was very familiar with Brian Deer's work. And he put side by side some of Brian Deer's reporting and a section of Illuminati's video on the start of the anti-vax movement. And it was quoted verbatim.
Then in 1995, he was suspended from practicing medicine and made to pay a $10,000 fine for his misuse and misprescribing of controlled drugs.
Then in 1995, he was suspended from practicing medicine and made to pay a $10,000 fine for his misuse of prescribing controlled drugs.
And it sounded like she was presenting these words as her own. And so that didn't help. It's not a good look when somebody goes, hey, you just accused somebody of plagiarism, but what's this? Now, she would have a response to that, but that got rolled into a response to a number of other things, because this is when the thing that sort of lit the spark that would become the bomb of all this happened, which is there's another creator who I'm actually not familiar with at all, because I knew Illuminati, I know Legal Eagle. I say I know, not personally, but I'm familiar with Illuminati, familiar with Legal Eagle, familiar with Bomber Guy. But another creator called The Click was apparently asked about this kind of drama, and in particular about Illuminati's behavior and quickness to condemn and lash out, because apparently Illuminati worked with The Click and a number of other creators, some of which are going to come up in a minute, on a collaborative channel called Sad Milk, which I'm not going to go into exactly what that was because I had never heard of it before any of this happened, and the exact nature of that channel doesn't actually really matter, not for my purposes. So The Click basically did a Twitter thread saying, look, I don't interact with Illuminati anymore. We haven't really spoken at all. And it's because this kind of behavior is actually very typical of her. And it's why we no longer collaborate and why I don't really talk to her at all anymore. Now, one could argue whether or not The Click should have laid out as much as he did and whether or not that was stirring drama. It's a little bit subjective, I would say, on that. One could make that argument, certainly. It was prompted by his followers asking for his thoughts on what was going on. He wasn't obligated to respond. He could have just said, that's really I have no opinion. This has nothing to do with me. But he did take the opportunity to kind of say his piece a little bit of that. He basically did not have a good working relationship with Illuminati. And also on Twitter, The Click was backed up by another creator who was part of Sad Milk named Wonderstruck, who basically backed up The Click stories and said, yeah, that is very much how she is and has been. So then the thing that just blew the whole thing up happened. Illuminati put out a response video. Now, it starts out well enough. She addresses the stuff that happened with Legal Eagle, which had pretty much already been resolved on Twitter itself, but she really reiterates all that. She talks about Bomber Guy's suggestion that she may plagiarize Brian Deer. Her explanation for that was it hadn't been her intention to present Brian Deer's words as if they were her own. She was directly quoting them, but says that she didn't do a good job of making it clear that what she was saying was a quote from his reporting instead of her own words, which is possible. I mean, it's sloppy work if that is ultimately the case, but that is possible to have happened. So that stuff was addressed well enough. Then she decided to respond to the stuff said by The Click and by Wonderstruck. And this is where everything went to hell. Because rather than just responding to what they said about working with her, or indeed just going, I feel bad that they felt the need to comment on this at all. I'd like to think that whatever happened between us is both strictly between us and in the past. So I would rather they hadn't said anything, but I'm not going to fuel that fire. Like something like that probably would have been the best thing she could have said. She didn't say that. She didn't even really focus on debunking or disproving anything that they said. Instead, she decided to throw out accusations of her own and pull a whole, oh, well, you think I'm bad? Wait till I tell you about these two. And I'm not going to go through it all because it's a lot, but it was some pretty nasty stuff that she accused the two of them of engaging with. And the one thing that I will point out specifically is she brought up Wonderstruck's mental health and the state of his mental health at the time and some struggles he was having, which is a real bullshit move. Somebody's mental health, it is their right to disclose that to other people. It's not yours. So that is like the big but other than that, it's like she made a lot of allegations. Like that thing she shouldn't have done regardless, but she made a lot of accusations that basically amounted to, boy, if that's true, she really is firing back against these people. Well, unfortunately, they weren't going to let that stand. And unlike Illuminaughtii, who came with some very carefully tailored handful of things and very carefully curated stories, the Click and Wonderstruck came back with a lot of receipts for how things actually went down. And also at that time, a bunch of other people started coming out of the woodwork, former employees, collaborators. Stuff was found regarding an old boyfriend of Illuminaughti's, all of it pointing to the same kind of behavior: controlling, short-tempered, and abusive behavior. And as I said, all these other people showed up with receipts. And Illuminaughtii then did one thing very smart and one thing very stupid. The smart thing she did was not put out another video responding. She's actually gone back to business as normal on her channel, which, generally speaking, with these kinds of YouTube scandals, is the smartest thing you can do. Go back to the thing that people are here for you for. Go back to what they like to watch from you. Don't allow it to stop or break. Don't give them a chance to walk away. Keep doing your normal stuff at your normal output, which she has done. But it hasn't helped, which is surprising, because on paper, that's the best thing she could do. But as I said, she also did one of the dumbest things she could have done, especially considering the kinds of people that she has covered regularly on her channel and the kinds of behavior from these other business people that she has profiled and the kinds of things that they have done that have gotten them in more trouble and looked really bad. She did one of them, which was to send a cease and desist letter from her lawyers to, I believe it was initially Wonderstruck, and then another to another former collaborator of hers, Oz Media. Now, I haven't mentioned Oz Media up to now. In his own tweet in which he pointed out that he had gotten a cease and desist from her lawyers, he then mentioned in the Twitter thread, I haven't even made a video yet. Her lawyers issued to him a cease and desist that was referencing videos he was not even in. Using a cease and desist to try and silence criticism, especially of something that is already known to the public, that's not a smart move. And since then, and this, like, most of this happened a month ago or more, but more stuff keeps coming forward. Either more people have come forward with more information, or people following this have dug up more stuff from the past, because she honestly has a little bit of a history of behavior that does fit into this. It's just the full picture wasn't known before. People weren't really talking the way that they are now. And it does appear to be in many ways like what happened during a lot of the Me Too movements with people like Bill Cosby or Harvey Weinstein, which is that there were lots of people with stories to tell, many of whom had receipts and had evidence to back up their version of events. But nobody wanted to be the first one to come forward and say anything, because you risk getting stomped under the foot of a beloved and bigger name than you and being bombarded by their fans. And you risk standing alone and being obliterated. But after, I would say initially the clicks sort of started to lay some stuff up, but definitely after she did her video accusing the Click and Wonderstruck of the various things she accused them of, and them coming back and going, oh, hang on a minute, and laying out everything that they had, that seemed to open the floodgates of people going, oh, yeah, me too. And I actually didn't mean to make that comparison to the actual Me Too movement and then use the phrase, but that really was kind of it. It's a lot easier to say that also happened to me when you know you won't be alone. And so, as I said, the floodgates have opened and they haven't really stopped since. So that's the background. What was the fallout? Well, iilluminaughtii had around 1.5 million subscribers. Now, she has lost over 100,000 of those subscribers. Now, just by raw numbers, that may not sound like that much, because it's what, less than 10%? But first of all, for a channel that size to lose that many that quickly, because it was a precipitous drop, it was immediate, it's not good. And I'll explain some of the reasons why, even though, again, by numbers, it's like, oh, that shouldn't mean that much of a difference. There's also the fact that there's a good chance she's lost more than that. There are some folks who track the way that channels are growing, and there's been some suspicious activity in the last month or so that may indicate the use of bots to try and bump the numbers back up. Things like what looked like a growth of 1,000 new subscribers in a matter of minutes, which is generally pretty suspect. But even if that's being done, or even if it's not, it doesn't matter. It's not enough to counteract how many subscribers she is losing. Now, to explain why 100,000 subscribers is actually huge, even to a channel that had, or still has actually, over 1 million subscribers, is this. No matter what the number of subscribers you have is, no YouTuber assumes that that's how many views you're going to get. You'd think logically, oh, this many people want to be notified every time I put out a video. All of them will watch every video I put out. That is not the reality. That's never the reality. So what that 100,000 likely represents, especially given what happened to her views, which I'm going to come back to, that 100,000 likely represents her most engaged and dedicated viewers. They were probably the ones who were coming in and watching as soon as a new video was uploaded, seeing almost every one that went up. They're the ones who are probably gone, because there's a lot of stuff that can fill out a subscriber number that aren't actually people actively engaged in your content on a regular basis. You can have dead accounts that basically aren't used at all anymore, but they subscribe to you at some point. You can have people who maybe only subscribe to you for certain kinds of content, so they're subscribed to see when you upload that, but they're not going to watch everything that you upload. Or sometimes if the algorithm is feeling particularly spicy, it's distinctly possible that they're just not sending your new videos to your subscribers anyway, because YouTube is fun like that. But yeah, that 100,000, that's a severe hit. And then there's what happened to her views. So, prior to all this going down, what was standard views for iilluminaughtii video was easily over 100,000, usually several hundred thousands. Not uncommon to break 1 million. That didn't happen all the time, but it also happened semi-regularly. Her videos were very reliably very well viewed. Now, after that initial video response, they went down a bit. They were failing, new videos were failing to clear 200,000, which some videos prior to that, to this whole thing happening, wouldn't clear 200,000, but they were the exception more often than not. But then as more and more stuff came out, as more stuff unraveled, as more people came forward with their own stories and the receipts to back them up, she's gone for a stretch now of multiple videos that have not even cracked 100,000. And for reference, I went back through her feed to see how long ago was it the last time that she failed to break 100,000 views on a video. And it was back in April of 2022. And it just barely failed to hit 100,000. Some of the stuff she's putting out now isn't even breaking 50,000. This is a huge, huge drop, and it is consistent with each new video release. It's not coming back up. And this is probably hitting a lot more than that. Multiple of her regular sponsors, corporate sponsors, have said they will no longer be advertising with her. They've canceled her contracts. They pulled out with using her as someone to be a spokesperson or to support their content. She's not only lost a lot of subscribers, but a lot of direct financial support. Now, it's arguable how much or which of these sponsors involved are abandoning her because of the look, because the look very much right now is consistently of somebody controlling, abusive, and very quick to anger. And some of these brands probably just don't want to be associated with that. Others are probably looking at the numbers drop and going, it's not worth it for us to be connected to this person. Because I don't doubt that some of these corporations, if her numbers had never dipped, would be going, it's worth it. Enough people are going to see our stuff. It's worth it. But like, with numbers now as low as she's getting, she's not worth it. She's not worth the trouble now to most companies. So why is this hitting so much harder than the standard YouTube scandal or drama or controversy? Because it is. Like, this is lasting longer in terms of like how much stuff is coming out, and it is hitting her harder despite, as I said, her doing one of the smartest things you can do, which is to not let it interrupt your output. And it's not helping. Why not? Well, this is the main thing that I wanted to focus on, and putting this into context of other similar situations to see how it is the same or how it is different. So when we think of a lot of YouTube controversies, some of the big ones involve names like Jake Paul or Logan Paul. I forget which one, or both. I don't know. Or PewDiePie. That's another big one. Or even some smaller scale ones, like when somebody like Blair White was caught telling easily verified lies about a trans athlete and things of that nature. These things have blown up in these creators' faces and often resulted in multiple people doing think pieces, takedowns, and even an initial loss of some subscribers at the time. But all these people are still around. They didn't go away. They took a little hit. They took a little ding at the time, but it didn't stick. It wasn't sustained, and it wasn't this severe. What's the difference? Well, I think the first thing has to do with the nature of what has been found out about Illuminati. Because we look at the scandals involving people like Logan Paul or like PewDiePie, and honestly, the stuff that they got in trouble for is more or less in line with their known personalities, with what everybody knows about them. Like, they got in trouble for basically pushing it too far. You know, in the case of PewDiePie, pushing a quote-unquote edgy humor too far. And most people agreed that is too far. But it was still the kind of thing he did. So it was in line with what people understood him to be. And while some people bounced off as a result of that, most people would just be like, well, as long as he doesn't go that far again, I'll still be here. And similarly, with someone like Blair White, because ultimately people were there for the kinds of content that she made, and she continued to make that content. And honestly, nobody was really going to her for hard-hitting, well-researched news. People were going to her to get their pre-existing opinions validated. And she continued to give them that. And even the horrendously terrible lies that she said about a number of people. I might have a slight personal stake in that history, but even with all that, it still was very much in keeping with the kind of stuff that she was known for doing. It's not like people didn't know she cherry-picked things and exaggerated. They did. She just got caught doing it more egregiously than usual. But it all was still in keeping with people's understanding of her. To take it out of the realm of YouTube for an instant, this, I think, is a big part of why the scandal that was supposed to wreck Donald Trump in his initial campaign for president, the Access Hollywood tape, where he not only admitted to but bragged about sexually assaulting women it didn't sink him because it wasn't in contrast with his known persona or personality. People knew he was a sexist pig. They were having it shoved in their face just how much of one he was, but it's a lot easier for people to go, okay, so he's more of this thing than I thought he was, but I also did kind of know. And for those people to just roll with it and move on. Illuminaughtii, by contrast, she built her brand, she built her success on analyzing and cataloging bad business practices and the individual personalities behind them. Personalities often that she would document and note how they were volatile, manipulative, and controlling and abusive. All the stuff she was accused of being. So when you have built your career on calling out or documenting cases of other people doing this stuff, and it is then revealed that you effectively do essentially the same thing, that's going to hit you a lot harder than you did something that people are already mostly okay with, but just did it too much. This is in direct contradiction to who people thought she was, which makes it more analogous in terms of YouTube to somebody like Ned from the Try Guys. Now, the Try Guys is a slightly different situation because he was not the only person there, and the other people involved did have the ability to effectively fire him, which isn't the case with Illuminaughtii. She is at the top of that particular mountain. But the basic fundamentals are very similar. Now, if you don't know everything that went on with the Try Guys, here's a real quick breakdown of that. Ned was kind of known as the relationship guy. His role within the group was the guy in a really super stable relationship. He'd built side businesses outside of the Try Guys that were basically monetizing his relationship with his wife and like how good and wonderful his marriage was. That was a huge part of his brand. And so when it came out that he not only cheated, but cheated with somebody who worked for him, it's not that that is the most egregious thing that anybody involved in YouTube or anything else has ever done. It's that it is in complete contradiction to what he had built his entire brand on, what he had built his fan base on. Everyone understood him to be this one thing, and that's not who he is. And that is what made him not viable to stay on with the Try Guys. I think more so than the actual nuts and bolts of what he did. They may or may not have gotten rid of him just for the power imbalance of, having an affair with an employee. And honestly, they should have gotten rid of him on that basis alone. But I bet you it would have been a much harder decision if the idea of him being in a super stable marriage wasn't such a huge part of his image. I think they would have gotten a lot of pushback at getting rid of him had that not been the case. Now, they still got some, but not a ton, because pretty much everyone looked at how Ned had built his brand, what he was known for, and then what he did and went, oh, well, to hell with that then. Because the basic foundation of who he claimed to be was destroyed. Similarly with Illuminaughtii. Another example, to step outside of YouTube again, would be Ellen DeGeneres. Now, Ellen DeGeneres was very well known for cultivating a sense of kindness. Be nice, be sweet. That was a huge part of her image. Then stuff started to come out about the behind the scenes of her show and about her being very unpleasant to work for, very nasty, and just not the person people thought she was. And again, scandal-wise, it basically just amounts to, oh, your personality isn't what you project out into the world, which in terms of sins of Hollywood, pretty low. But again, it's in direct contrast, in direct contradiction to what it was people loved her for. Because you look at people like Logan Paul, like PewDiePie, like Channel Awesome, which again is one I've talked about before. They just got back to doing the thing that people love them for, which the stuff that they got in trouble for is not in direct contradiction to that. So to zoom in on Channel Awesome, the way that that company had been run, not good. It wasn't good. And they did take a hit when things came out about how that channel was run, and a bunch of the creators who have been part of that channel spoke their truth. Yeah, it wasn't a good look. And it did hit them insofar as there have been this sense of camaraderie between all the channels involved, and that image got broken. But Channel Awesome itself was still ultimately best known for the Nostalgia Critic stuff. And so, as long as they kept making Nostalgia Critic, then the people who came there for that, as long as they still enjoyed it, were likely to stick around and keep watching it, which they did. Again, not necessarily in the same numbers, and with places like Channel Awesome or some of these others, maybe a lot of other outlets or other groups like don't want to work with them anymore, don't want to be associated with them. Maybe they're not being asked to, guest spot on other stuff nearly as much as they used to be, because it's like, ooh, you're a bit of a lightning rod. But their core channels, they're fine. They're all fine. Illuminauttii's isn't. And I'll be really curious to see how long she can maintain the channel. Because as I said, she's not a one-person show. Like, this channel is a one-person show. The only thing that I don't do myself in terms of what it is that you see get put up on this channel is the thumbnails. I come up with the ideas for the most part on my own, and if it's scripted, I script it myself. And I shoot it. I'm the talent in front of the camera. I edit it. It's me. Illuminauttii has a team. Researchers, writers, editors. She has employees. Employees that I don't know if she's going to be able to continue to pay. Assuming that she was giving them a fair wage in the first place, I can't imagine she can maintain the team that she has. Which means that it might start to hit the one thing that, as I said, she was doing right, which was to maintain her content at the quality that it had already been and at the pace that it had been. But assuming she's paying everybody fairly, she's not going to be able to maintain that. Because without the corporate sponsors and without the view numbers and getting the same revenue she used to get from YouTube itself, I can't imagine she's going to be able to afford to support the entire team that she'd had before. Which means either quality is going to drop or the pace at which stuff comes out is going to drop. And then it's a question of whether or not that is so demotivating that she just decides to stop. That will come down to her own personality and how she feels about it. I don't know. But this is the first time in a while in a scandal that is short of being accused of being a nonce. That kind of stuff. There aren't a lot of scandals on YouTube that will kill you completely. There are accusations of predatory behavior towards people too young for you. That one can get you completely abandoned. But other than that, assuming that your channel isn't shut down for violations of policy on the site, and honestly, those are barely enforced. But short of that, scandals that aren't the thing I just implied and mentioned, I can't name it. YouTube gets weird about it. But any kind of scandal that is short of that, they don't usually hit this hard or last this long. And most of the time, channels can bounce back if they want to. I don't know if Illuminauttii can. If her numbers were going to start to bounce back, they should have by now. And it really makes it interesting to talk about for that reason. This is a unique, kind of a perfect storm of the actual things that she's done, not good, to be clear, but also on the lower end of as far as potential scandal on YouTube goes. Oh, well, maybe not low end, middling. Let's go with middling as far as this kind of thing goes. But it's still hitting her a heck of a lot harder. And I think it's because of that disconnect. It is because of that contradiction between what everyone thought she was and who she is now proving to be. And as I said, she kind of brought a lot of this on herself. I get feeling the desire to respond to some of the stuff that Click said on Twitter and that Wonderstruck said, But her approach to doing that, which was to throw a bunch of accusations at them, which would then naturally just prompt them to respond to those. Maybe she assumed they wouldn't have receipts and that she'd be able to file it under, look, this is just a he said, she said thing. Believe who you want to believe. Except they came in it with a hell of a lot more evidence for their side of the story than she had for hers. And maybe she just didn't account for that. Or maybe, as she has admitted to already in this whole thing, she acted rashly and without properly thinking through what she was doing. Regardless of which is the case, she has undoubtedly had the biggest hand in the destruction of her own business. Because all of this is based off of her own past behavior. That is what's coming forward. And even if that wasn't the case, she has made all of it worse by issuing cease and desist, including to somebody who hadn't even done anything yet. And just her behavior and the picture that has been painted. And pretty much the true floodgates didn't open until she did her response video, because that was when people would go, oh, okay, now I'm throwing everything I've got against you. She basically went, oh, no, I'm not the bad guy. They are. And they came with bigger guns. She came with a pea shooter. They came with cannons. Maybe she didn't realize that they had them, but nobody was busting out the cannons and pointing them in her direction until she started throwing out her own accusations. The best thing she could have done was to just acknowledge the Legal Eagle and the H-Bomber guy stuff. And as I said before, just chalk up the stuff from the click as being like, look, that's private and from a few years ago, and I really don't like that was shared, but I'm not going to comment on it. To sort of play that I'm going to rise above this thing. Now, would that have worked 100%? Not necessarily, but I think it would have made it a lot less likely that everyone would have come out of the woodwork with their own story. And so there we have the core of the fall of Illuminati. She gave them reason to start talking. This site's wild, man. And no, this is not a signal that I'm going to start talking about drama. There's obviously a ton of drama that I don't talk about. Like, I was familiar with the Try Guys thing. I still didn't talk about it. I considered it briefly because I did find the dynamics of it kind of interesting, but I felt like that story had been picked clean by the time I would have gotten to it. This, as I said, this thing has way longer legs than I expected it to. But yeah, that's Illuminati. We'll see how much longer things stick around in the state that they're currently in for her channel. But what are your thoughts on all this? What do you think was Blair's big mistake? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon is how I'm able to do this as my living. Even if you can't support me that way, there's links down in the description for other things that I do, other platforms, etc. And there's the like, the share, the subscribe. I mentioned earlier the algorithm doesn't always play fair, and yeah, I'm feeling that off and on in the last few years. So there is that, but don't worry too much about it. What I want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council, and I am just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. Massive thanks to my Patreon supporters, and in particular, I want to thank Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Ruth, Oliver B., Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Jen, Leotha Boyd, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Fernabilax the Poodle, Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Kasparov, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, David Hall, Shayla Gourlay, and Rosalind Bennett. Thanks for your support. You can get your name in the credits too if you feel like hearing me possibly struggle with it for several times before getting it right.